Welcome back to The Building Code, the podcast for builders who want to build smarter businesses. I'm your host, Carly Ward. Today, we're talking about something that's becoming increasingly apparent across the construction industry, the growing gap between builders who are adapting to change and those who are still doing things the way they always have. In the next 5 years, building beautiful homes won't be enough. The builders who thrive over the next 5 years will be the ones pairing quality work with disciplined, resilient operations. And we're bringing in two people who are the best to talk about this, Eric and Preston from Seed Development and Design, who are making their second appearance on the Building Code. If you listen to episode 269, they turned a $268,000 loss at the end of 2023 into more than $350,000 in profit in just a year's time. They've built their business on strong craftsmanship and a genuine commitment to delivering an exceptional homeowner experience for their clients across the greater North Atlanta metro area. I'm excited to bring out Eric Stenger and Preston Reed from Seed Development and Design. Preston, Eric, how we doing? Great to see you.
How are you?
Doing so good. Admittedly, wishing we were back in Cabo for the Breakthrough Academy Summit. I know we're both getting slapped with a little cold weather.
Yeah, miss those sunny days for sure.
Way better to have our feet in the sand a little bit.
Yeah, right.
Well, we're so pumped to have you on again for your second time on the Building Code. Like I said, last time we saw each other, we were in Cabo for the Breakthrough Academy Summit. And we were talking about a lot of exciting things going on with you two and with Seed Development and Design. I know you guys just recently started a YouTube channel, but kind of give us a little background, what's been going on the last year and especially since the start of the year.
Yeah, 2025 was actually a pretty good year for us. Once again, we've been blessed with substantial growth. Right, we're we're growing by about a 25% rate year over year, if not more. Which has been awesome, right? We also were able to purchase our shop this year. So we got a 6,000 square foot shop. We're trying to finish building out. That's been a challenge of its own. We're trying to juggle all the work while trying to get stuff done at the shop. But it's been good. We're trying to make this our home base for clients can come here and really see the stuff before it begins, right? And really put their hands on the materials and really just that we pride ourselves on being as personable as possible. And, and the technology is great, but it's like, you have to have a little bit of that mix of with the technology, but also the personal contact, I think, with people. So it's been great though. So 2025, like I said, with all the growth in there and everything, I mean, we've had our challenges throughout the year also with some personnel growth and stuff like that, but as everyone knows, it comes and goes with time.
Totally. Preston, you've been the one kind of behind the camera for your YouTube channel.
That's a change of pace for me. I'm usually the one behind closed doors. So
are you having to shackle Eric down to keep him out behind the camera?
No, he's the one that's kicking me out and saying, "Hey, you need to get out there and do this." So it's been good. It's been fun. YouTube's been a fun little project that we've talked about for years, but kind of put off, and it just kind of seemed like the right time this past year to kind of kick it off. So we did that, released some longer videos to the public, and we've gotten some clients out of it. So that's been a really cool thing to see people, wanting to learn more about us before they actually meet us. So it's been a fun project.
Well, I imagine as you're, as a homeowner, you're thinking about putting a large investment into a renovation and addition. And I'm sure this is a really great way to give them a little peek behind the scenes of like what you guys are like, what their personalities are going to mesh and what that experience is going to look like for them and be valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, like I said, it's been fun thus far. So we got a couple more coming up that we're excited to release, and it'll be good.
Cool. Well, for the listeners that aren't super familiar with both of you and Seed Development and Design, you serve the North Atlanta metro area, focusing on residential remodels, renovations, and outdoor living spaces. The two of you have actually been best friends for most of your lives, coming up on 7 years in business, and you've built an amazing team culture along the way. Looking back to when you guys first started the company, what do you think's changed the most, and what feels the most different about the business compared to some of those early years?
I think the early years, we were just like nose to the grindstone a little bit, just like swinging hammers, trying to build things because that's what we knew how to do, but didn't really know a lot about building the business or building a business or a company. We knew previous places we had worked and what we didn't want it to be, but we didn't, I guess, know how to really curate the team that we were after and the culture we were after, and really all the technicalities behind financially running a company. So all those things have been a large learning lesson and things that we've progressively changed year over year. But yeah, it's been a roller coaster.
Yeah, I think, with entrepreneurship, right? It's like you always hear, I think I heard something today about, it's one of the hardest jobs to take on, right? And it's one thing we've learned from our mistakes and we've grown from it and have defeated those mistakes, right? I think it's something where you have to know to adapt. I think some great key points to our conversation we'll have today. I think it's about not being stuck in your old ways, right? And knowing when to change and not doing it too late. I think those are a lot of things which has helped us and blessed us in many ways.
So with coming up on 7 years in business, you've alluded to it even within the last year, but over the course of these 7 years, what do you think the biggest mistake that you've learned from is?
Oof. Financial understanding.
Yeah.
Without a doubt.
I think that when we first started, right, like we didn't have Buildertrend, and we're using Excel spreadsheets and Google Sheets, right, and trying to track it as fast as we can, right, and just some of the changes that once we came across Buildertrend, it opened our eyes to so much more. So from what we were being told on what we needed to track, but really not having been able to do it in at a live time, right. At any due time, be able to hop in there and look at our numbers for any project, for anything within the business. So I think us grabbing that and really diving into understanding that, right? 'Cause neither of us want to have a financial background, right? So it allowed us to really be able to hone in on the inside of all that.
It gave us clarity, right? It allowed us to give us educated decision-making tools.
And I know Breakthrough Academy was a huge piece of that, and getting involved in their business coaching and having a dedicated coach to kind of help provide that clarity and that understanding and feeling, I'm sure, in a much more confident space than you did a couple years ago.
Yes,
absolutely. Our coach, we had two coaches at Breakthrough, and they both have been kind of fundamental in their backgrounds and what they brought over to us and guided us through. And Buildertrend was kind of the tool that allowed us to see the numbers, and Breakthrough was kind of the one that coached us through what they really meant and how to interpret them. So it's been great, the relationship there.
Yeah, two powerful pieces. Gives us a nice segue into kind of where we're headed. So we're seeing a ton of industry changes, and it seems like there's kind of these two groups of builders: the ones that are like, I've been building houses with a pen and paper with my bare hands for 40 years,
Yep.
and those that are understanding that it's going to take a little bit more than just awesome craftsmanship, and it really is a matter of how are we running this business to be sustainable and successful. So what do you think from your experience, what are the biggest changes that we're seeing in the industry right now that builders aren't fully recognizing?
Yeah, so it's kind of speaking to what you're saying about like builders, 10, 15, 20 years ago, definitely had their reputation built on, well, a good relationship and trust, right? And nowadays it needs to be more transparent with the clients. Clients have so much transparency in so many other aspects of their life, and they have that expectation that that's what they're going to get with builders. And that lack of transparency and communication with them is, I feel like, a big pitfall or something that's going to really divide these groups of builders coming up in the future.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a big part to all that, right? It's like, I think the benefit with us being a design build firm, right, is we're trying to hash out all the details before construction even starts, right? That means not just selections wise, but that also means contract. That also means pricing. That also means making sure that all the verbiage is okay for them in regards to the contract, and really going through all that with a fine tooth comb so that they all understand and we understand what is expected of both of us.
Yeah.
And going off of that, when we think about companies that are struggling, or even you guys a couple of years ago when you were kind of in your turnaround phase, what habits have you corrected, or what habits are you seeing in companies now that could help drive them in a better direction?
Yeah, I feel like it's communication has been a huge one for us, and not just client communication, internal communication, documentation. It's all about what we're tracking and able to show, improve, and rely on for clarity and information across our internal team and also the team with the client. It's been a huge continuous shift. Like we definitely are not perfect at it by any means. But it's something that we're always improving on, and we understand the importance of it and how that's going to affect future projects and how it's affected projects in the past for us.
And with putting all that documentation into place and really kind of honing in on client expectations during the pre-construction process, how is that evolving the clients that you're working with?
And well, I feel like the clients that expect that are maybe a different tier, right? They're busy individuals. They have a lot going on in their life. But a lot of those people, I mean, everything nowadays, you can like access your bank account on your phone. You can track your flights in real time. You can track packages being delivered and when they're going to be there. And everybody wants that transparency with a real quick click of the button. Buildertrend's allowed us to provide that to those clients, and those types of clients want to see that. So they want to see their schedules, they want to see their budgets, they want to see their selections, all those things in real time. And we now have tools and knowledge to be able to provide that, and it becomes an experience for those clients as well. And that's what they're really after.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest lessons we learned, right, was, over the years is like having the inclusions and exclusions in the contract, right? Making the client fully aware, like what is included in your base cost, what's included in your selections, right? And it goes back to when I talk about the fine tooth comb, right? It's breaking it out in so much detail so that someone's not like, oh, wait, was that supposed to be included? Or like, oh, no, like there's a paper trail for everything, right? I know we're not using paper anymore, but at least it'll come back to Buildertrend where you can at least see the contract.
Yeah.
Got to have a receipt somewhere, even if it's electronic.
Yeah, always.
So, for some of our newer builders that might not be in a space where they have everything documented, as well as you guys do, what do you think are like 3 really critical pieces to putting SOPs into place to set those really nice expectations for clients?
Yeah, so I think SOPs are almost a little bit different than the client interaction, right? Our SOPs that we've tried to establish are definitely an internal tool, right? And our SOPs started very basic in a Word document. We were just typing up different steps that we would roll out to the team. But with clients, I feel like that process for the people that don't have all the technology or don't have Buildertrend or whatever it is, we live in such a tech world now that, you have AI in your pocket and you can pull it out and record your meeting, and a lot, I feel like the gray areas or the things that get dropped in communication are those like random text messages or mostly the in-person walks you have with clients on a job site, right? When you're out there talking to your trades, talking to the client, they ask simple little questions. And if you have some way to record that or at least document it right after, that would be the thing I'd tell them off the top of my head. The first thing to tell them is just start documenting everything that you do.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. Because even in my own experience, like I'm a great listener, but I'm not a great note taker and listener at the same time. And so, everybody's a little bit different, but, whatever you can do to make sure that those critical pieces are getting documented, like so important for that client experience. So going into some of the risk management and kind of how you're handling these conversations with clients, there's a lot of problems in construction projects with not necessarily coming from craftsmanship, but from not setting those expectations clearly and upfront. So where do you think the biggest hidden risks are showing up in construction projects?
I think a lot of it goes back to they're not being fully laid out cost representation for everything, right? If it's not within your contract, you're going to bend to certain things, and the client's going to ask for certain things, right? And if there's not a fully detailed expectation of what's going through, you end up eating the cost, right? 'Cause at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if it's not in the contract. You don't have that much ground to stand on, or the client's going to turn his back on you or her back on you and leave you a bad review, right? And what does that do to your company, right? So it's if the paperwork in regards to the contract like that has to be broken out so well that you're not having to go back and step back on your toes to make sure that you're not hurt in the long run.
Right.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%. Misalignment and expectations of just two people assuming something different and having it documented and clear on paper, so two people are exactly on the same page. It eliminates all that gray area.
So what are some processes that you guys have in place currently to help kind of curb that from happening and, both parties are aligned?
Yeah, so I think what we realized was our miscommunication previously started early on. We're design build, so we go through an entire design process before we even get into construction. And we implemented something as simple as recording our virtual meetings, and that was our first piece of the puzzle. That was, we're documenting everything. And then we'd start, we'd follow up every meeting with meeting notes. And it was a summary of like, okay, this is what we all took away from this meeting. Here is your copy. Here's our copy. Everybody's on the same page, right? And then we started rolling that out further into the field. And it was internal communication. Okay, if you have a sidebar conversation, it's required to get documented in this location. And so internally, everybody was on the same page. And we have that through pre-construction. When projects roll into pre-construction, now they can see, okay, this is the most up-to-date synopsis of all the conversations thus far, right? And then in construction, we just keep that as a live living document so that everybody can update as conversations happen.
One of the one of the things we brought in also, right, is design was doing a really good job of detailing all their stuff on their end, and then Preston and I brought up a way to transition that design into construction, right? We saw there was a broken link, right? So pretty much Preston, we created this, it's called like a project narrative pretty much, right?
Narrative, yes.
So we went through and pretty much hashed out all the details from design and what is being expected for the construction team on what is happening during the overall scope of the project, right? So not only that, so the construction team has supplied that. We do a complete roundtable with the design team and the project manager, so that all the communication internally is addressed. That if there's any outliers, it's at least taken care of internally before the project manager goes and starts having conversations with the client. So it helps with that gray area there. So we're not walking into a project, or at least the project manager is not walking into a project not having all the tools needed to address all the concerns with the client.
No, and I know you guys have talked about that when you've been out to Buildertrend University before, both with our clients and our CS reps. And I know that really resonated because you're right, there is typically a pretty good gap between, production and design, and being able to bridge that as much as we can and having that living, breathing document, like, so crucial. And so I'm curious, when there are changes that happen to the project, not that it's very often, but when that happens, is that project manager and the designer, are they kind of doing a roundtable again or looping back with each other to make sure that the things are still on the tracks?
Yeah, so it kind of depends. I'd say most of the time changes are handled by the PM solely, but there are definitely situations where if it is an aesthetic decision or very much we have a particular client that's wants something done a certain way, we loop the designers back in that worked on that project to make sure that we're achieving the end goal or end result that the client's after. So it depends. We luckily have a really close team. So, the design team sits 2 desks away from the PM. So it's not like it's a crazy big office that nobody gets to talk to each other. So we get a lot of good sidebar conversations inside the office to address any of those issues.
Yeah. And, we've talked a lot about communication and processes, and those are 2 critical pieces to, keep a business running and to keep it successful. But it definitely takes a mindset shift, from the top down. What do you think the biggest challenge with getting that relayed kind of down throughout your team has been?
We have we use Buildertrend every single day for every project, but we have like a secondary kind of internal system we use to track all of our stuff, all of our, not just KPIs and financials, but also project standings, critical action items, things like that. And we use it in kind of a sister conjunction with Buildertrend. And that is where we keep living communication and documentation. And so that for us has been great. So if anybody at any level has comments to be made on that information or that project, it all goes there, and everybody involved in that project has that updated information to access. So it eliminates like, well, I told this person, but they didn't tell this person. It's no, it was here. Everybody knows it's here. That's where you go to get your updates.
That's awesome. And just hearing all the stories about your team and how you guys have evolved, like I love getting to hear from you guys how you incentivize your team and how you create this, really cohesive community within your team. Like, talk to me about some of the incentives you use with your team, whether it be for reviews, or I know you guys have something going with posts and stuff like that. Talk to me a little bit about that.
So yeah, it's like we talked about, right? Like technology, right? We all know that, it's not much of the door knocking anymore, right? So speaking of the posting, right? Like, so we do, Instagram posts and follows and how many likes are on reels and stuff like that for some of our team members, right? But we also do like reviews, right? It also goes back to their quality of what they're doing for the client. So those are some of the incentives. What else we do? We do incentives for, one of the big things that gets lost for a lot of companies is your timeline for projects being completed, right? It gets lost quickly, right? And your clients want to know, like, hey, listen, how long is this project going to take, right? This is part of the contract, right? It's like, this is an 8-week project, and then, it starts going, if it goes past that, then that takes away from their incentive, right? If they get it done even sooner, then they get a better incentive on that side of it. But I think that's probably one of the biggest things that we learned over these last couple of years is it doesn't matter how profitable the project is. If it's a month past the deadline, then you got a problem.
Yeah.
Right.
That's true.
Well, that kind of takes us into our next topic, surrounding approvals and like the actual approval, with a written signature versus the handshake. Yeah. So for builders that might still be in the headspace of like, a handshake is as good as a written signature, what would you say to those builders?
Garbage.
First of all, I want to lead this off. Buildertrend just updated all of this recently, and it is absolutely amazing.
Whoop, whoop. Humble brag.
I think so. I mean, Buildertrend, I know, has been growing over the years with it, right? And I think it goes back to being very descriptive, right? For the clients, and then not just say, "Oh, cool, here's your change order for $2,000," right? It now allows us to go through very similar to the proposal y'all released a year or so ago, right? It's very laid out and allows you to go through and do a whole thesis of, what is going on in your change order and why we're doing this and why you're being charged this. That has been a huge benefit for us and really the transparency of the client once again, right? But it also allows for us to go through and go back to the paper trail, right? And say, hey, no, we talked about this. This was in your description, right? It's not just a number here. You don't just see a line item, right? You're seeing the whole entire paragraph or so of what we're doing and why we're doing it, and why you're asking for this change order. And then they sign it. And so it goes back to being able to hold the client accountable and hold ourselves accountable to what's been said.
Yeah, that's been a huge change for us over the years, because for so long, and I think every builder is guilty of it at some point in their career, where you're on site, framing crews are there, and the client comes in and say, "Hey, can we move this door like 4 feet this way?
Yeah, this can line.
Yeah, can we change this tile out instead of this to that?" And in the moment, it might be like, "Yeah, we can do that." Blah blah blah, and you walk away from that meeting with two distinctive expectations in two different ways, right? And so being able to document that, I think, is one crucial thing that we talked about earlier, but then being able to put it into something like Buildertrend where your client can realize, well, this is what we talked about, but this is also the price associated to it, and this is the schedule impact that's going to happen from it. And seeing all that in one place for them is huge. It's huge for us.
I feel like that's where the most negative interactions with homeowners comes in, when you have like those disjointed expectations. It's like, sure, we can do that. And then 3 weeks later, it's like, well, it's going to cost $5,000. Like, maybe I wouldn't have made that decision had I known that right up front.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think probably a big part of this, right, is this has to be like pushed on your team also, right? Like if your team's not doing this, like if we're doing it is one thing, right? But if everyone under us do have that expectation, like you're talking about earlier, right? It goes to it drops to the side, right? Because like you're just talking about, right? If you go you're saying everyone needs to do these change orders, right? But that one project manager is like, oh, he's just giving the nod that it'll be okay and we'll get it resolved later. It goes right back to that same issue, right? So that at least allows us with Buildertrend now is we're going in there, and every time something is talked about, we actually now have this internal group chat through our Google system, through our Google suite, which, anytime a change order is brought up with a client, it's sent right directly to our project coordinator and she inputs it.
Yeah.
So there's no gaps in saying, oh, I'll get this an hour from now. It's getting addressed right then and there.
It goes back to SOPs, right?
Mm-hmm. So if I'm a homeowner and I want a different electrical plate, are we getting a change order for that?
Depends if it's what you're saying.
Okay.
Yes, probably though. Yeah.
So like every little thing for the most part is being documented. Maybe not always a cost coming from it, depending how small or little it is, but
yeah, definitely get documented for sure. Absolutely.
Gotcha. So going along with, lack of documentation and, not having those processes clearly documented, can you think of a specific instance where the handshake agreement came back to bite you guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which one?
Which one? Yeah.
Scope changes all the way around the board for sure. Yeah, I don't think really clients understand the impact that it has all the way through the project, and the lack of documentation there. Like I said earlier, having two people with different expectations out of a conversation, it can really get you. And if clients are assuming that after a conversation that's included, because you're like, yeah, no, we can do that, and we're walking away like, well, that's going to be a $6,000 change order, and at the end of the day, we go ahead and do the work on a handshake confirmation or a sidebar conversation, thinking, oh yeah, no, they definitely understood that was going to be more money. Then there's a confrontation that has to happen, or at least a hard conversation that has to happen on the back end of it on compensation for that. So we have a pretty strict policy, and we learned it early on that, when a change order needs to take place, if there's changes on site to whatever scope, it's definitely communicated and documented. And if there's a price associated to that change, which most of the time there is, that needs to be signed off and agreed upon by the client in writing. We use Buildertrend for that before that work takes place.
That's what broke us in the past from those mistakes, right? Is we don't. That's what we hold ourselves to now. Is if that signature and the approval's not completed, we're not touching it.
Yep.
It costs us $0 to do it, right? What's that saying?
Price is the price.
Yeah, price is the price. And I think the biggest part to all that is, it's there's more harm than good if you don't get it signed or at least approved, right?
Well, and I feel like in a lot of situations, you're also setting yourself up for future issues to not come up. So, it's really just protecting yourself and your client's experience throughout the course of the project. And you mentioned earlier, Preston, how easy it is to, get a text message or a random email, asking about these changes. And based off of what you guys have said, it sounds like you're directing almost all your communication through Buildertrend to prevent from those slips in between the cracks. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we try to document everything we can in Buildertrend to the best of our degree. There's still, again, those sidebar conversations that you may have in person, and we utilize a different program to just capture all of that information. But regardless, everything that is talked about on a project ideally is captured and documented, so our entire team's in the loop for all of it.
And I'm curious from a client perspective, how much responsibility do you put on them to utilize like the client portal and communicate through Buildertrend, or is it more so you guys taking that information and filtering into Buildertrend on internally?
Yeah, so we've gone back and forth over the years. I think starting out, we had other tech stacks, if you will, of different ways to communicate in different platforms to different people. And we've tried to kind of narrow that down to utilize Buildertrend and having clients use the portal, use the client chat or comment on selections or things like that, that allowed us to have one location to see all that information. We just got to make sure on our end internally that we're taking that communication and putting it in one central location for us, that it's like a one pager of like, this is the latest, this is the update, these are the next action items. And it's been very helpful that way.
No, that's awesome. And do you find your clients are using or like a little bit more gravitated towards using the client portal, or is it just kind of dependent on the
Yeah.
clients?
I think it depends on the client.
Yeah, I think I mean, and some are technology savvy, some aren't.
Yep.
I think most of them adapt to it. I think with us being design build, once again, like we kind of force their hand in it, right? They have to go in there and make all their selections, right?
Yep.
And they all adapt to it and figure it out pretty quickly. It's not like it's not user friendly. It's pretty simplistic in regards to them being able to navigate through it, right? And one of the cool things we love about it, right, is when you go in there, like selections, right? If they're not sure on which selections, they can favorite it for now. They can put a comment next to it,
Yep.
To at least kind of see where their pricing lays on everything. But even with all the comments, and I think that has at least helped us in our path of being able to go back and look at certain items if there's anything related to it, based on the client's comments on those areas and how we responded, instead of having to go chase through emails and say, oh, hey, we talked about this here, right? It's just, you're looking through this long valley of, never ending emails, right? So it allows us to really just go to one spot and just be able to clarify right then and there.
Well, and I imagine for the clients too, like the transparency is like very obviously there because you guys are working in it so often. And I imagine like being able to find the answers or the things that they want is a lot easier if they're going through that avenue rather than just doing the regular old, hey, Preston, hey, Eric, what's the status on this?
Yeah.
We always welcome those though,
Totally.
at all hours of the night, especially.
Yeah, right.
So, kind of thinking about habits that builders are taking to, put them into a place where they're, they're going to survive in 5, 10 years. What do you think some of those big habits are that people are putting into place right now that we haven't already discussed?
I think AI is going to be a big one. But it can hurt you also.
Yeah.
I think you have to give it grace. I think you can get a lot of guidance from it, but also be able to use your knowledge and your street skills, right, and your street knowledge to really understand how to adapt certain things and make it personable, right? AI is great into giving you answers, but it's in a very tech savvy format, right?
Still a little robotic.
Yeah, it's in a box, right? So I mean, I think there's a lot of understanding with that. I mean, I think we could go on and on about all that, right? But I think you can take pieces of it, and I think which will really help out with expediting a lot of productivity in many ways, but not taking it too far. I think that's the kind of thing is still making your business personable in many ways, because that's what your client's still going to want. They're going to want that client interaction with you. They're going to want to be able to speak to you and really talk to somebody instead of calling someone and listening to a robot talk to them. Right?
I mean, AI could not do a gravel angel for a promo post.
That's right. That is true.
But we can.
Yes. How about you, Preston? Anything besides AI or
Yeah, AI is obviously a hot topic for a lot of people right now, and I feel like we do talk about it a lot internally and just how we can utilize it to be more efficient. But I think our industry as a whole is becoming more and more sophisticated, and I think clients are raising the bar on their expectations for their experience, their client journey through their process with builders. And I think the builders that are going to succeed are going to be able to elevate that experience and give clients that process of transparency, really good communication, kind of live updates so they can see all those things that we've talked about, the budget, selections, schedule, all those things at any given time. And yeah, I think you have to be able to adapt to technology to a certain degree. And I think some people may be a little afraid of that because well, this is how I've been doing it for 30 years. But I think the reality of it is that there's going to be a gap that forms out of that. And the ones that embrace the journey are going to probably do a little better.
Yeah. And I think it's just important to hit on, just because I've watched kind of your social media presence grow over the last, year and a half or 2 years. And I think it's so cool how you guys put so much of your personality and all of your individual personalities into the way that you guys promote yourselves, to showing what the client experience is going to look like. And even just looking at your website, like, you guys have really taken the time to go in and document, like, verbally and or written, and as well as through video, this is what our experience is going to look like from start to finish. And if I'm a homeowner that wants you to do a remodel of my kitchen, like, that's going to go so much further than me just seeing services, kitchen remodel. Like, I get to know if, like, you're going to vibe, like, with my family or with me. And, do I want you in my house for several hours a day? So I think it's so cool that you guys are really leaning into that and diversifying it across a lot of different elements, adding in YouTube. And yeah, you guys are really pushing the limits with that. So I think it's important to mention.
Thank you, Fluff. Yeah, it's been an effort.
Well, you guys are doing a hell of a job. And not to dog on you, Eric, but I think Preston's starting to get the personality behind the camera. So you gotta watch out.
Oh yeah, he's getting there. I'm pushing him outside of his comfort zone.
Yeah, that's the truth.
So we've talked about a lot of the things that you guys have been doing. Thinking about the future, like, what are some things that you guys are really focused on this year that you aren't doing but want to start doing?
I mean, I think honestly, for a long time, Eric even mentioned at the beginning, like, we've been growing year over year over year, and it's been good. It's been exciting. It's been hard and stressful and all the things. I think actually this year we're not so much focused on growth. We're focused on, like, efficiency and streamlining our process and elevating the experience for our clients. Yeah. And then I think once we kind of, like, really streamline that and feel really, really good about all these parts and pieces, then we can get back to, like, all right, let's scale this thing to where we want to be.
Yeah, I think our biggest part is, Preston, I think we're trying to pretty much stabilize where we're at right now. Like, so I think we're at a really good size to kind of, I think we're build or breakthrough. Kind of talk about this, like, we're in the, there's a part of a business when you in construction where you get to purgatory. That's what they call it.
A couple different stages.
So it's funny how they bring it up. You're like, wow, like, all right, I've been drowning, right? But I feel good, right? We're getting there, right? But I think now it's like, we've seen a lot of the kinks, we've adjusted a lot of the kinks, and now I think we're at the point where, we want to finish making the system beautiful and run really well and smoothly, and then start climbing again. I think there's just a lot of people need to not be overzealous and realize that you can't always just keep running. There's got to be time when you start recalibrating. Yeah.
I'm sure it feels probably good to be in the recalibration stage.
Yeah.
So for builders that are, kind of thinking about their longevity and ways they can reduce risk within their business, what would be one suggestion you would give to them?
Start capturing decisions in one place. All documentation, communication in one place. And it doesn't have to be fancy. You don't have to have all this crazy tech or these fancy apps or programs, but just start putting it in one place. And I feel like that opens the door for opportunity and clarity. I feel like it's gonna streamline misunderstandings, get rid of the gray areas, and really just give your client the clarity thereafter moving forward in projects.
Yeah. And another part of that, right? I think, every company has to have change. For you to grow, you get to change, right? You got to make sure the people that are with you are willing to change also. That's I guess it's not just the owners that you see as a company, right? It's all the people behind them also, right? And if you don't see that they want to change, it's going to hurt, right? So you have to be able to understand that and find those people that are willing to grow with you.
And you guys are trying to grow your team, is that right? I was looking.
Yeah. Always
looking for a couple project
Always looking
managers.
for the top tier.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, what have been some of the most successful ways that you guys have found some of your current team members that you have? Because I know they've been with you a while.
Wow, a lot of it's been
I'd say a lot of the referrals, I mean, we've hired in a lot of different ways. We've explored a lot of different companies and social medias and a lot of different avenues to get people on board. But I think
word of mouth has been huge.
people that know us know who we are and know what we're about, and they give some recommendations, and those have been the key players that are like, they fit right in and they just run with it.
I think the really cool part to that really is like, so it's now think about this, right? So a lot of our business in the last 2 years and our growth has Google's been great, right? YouTube is now taking off for us. But 70% of our business last year was through word of mouth.
Yeah.
It relates back to like, if a client wants to work with you, there's probably some other people that want to work with you also on the personnel level, right? So I think it's how you carry yourselves, the atmosphere you're creating, all that stuff. It all correlates in many ways, so that you create a fun atmosphere, or you create somewhere you want to work hard but play hard. A lot of those kind of things, right? I think it's also, when it goes back to the client, right? It's creating that family feel.
Well, you guys are doing a great job, and I love seeing you get to grow. And if all else fails, I say put Eric out on a quarter with a seed costume and see who comes through the door.
Personality, yeah.
Well, guys, it's always so great talking to you. I so appreciate you diving into, what's been going on the last year. Obviously getting to see you since Cabo, and helping our builders really understand, from two individuals like you, what it takes in such a adapting industry, and some of the things that you guys are doing to put yourself into a good position for the future. So always appreciate it, and can't wait to have you guys back on again.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Carly.
The invitation.
We always love seeing you.
We'll see you guys. All right. Well, before we wrap up, I want to introduce something new to the building code. We want to hear from you, the builders, project managers, and professionals listening to our show. I'm Carly Ward, your host, and one of the things that I'm most excited about is bringing your questions into these conversations. If there's a topic that you'd like us to cover, a challenge that you're dealing with in your business, or something you'd like our guest to weigh in on, we'd love to hear it from you. So we'd ask that you send your questions or your ideas to podcast@buildertrend.com, and we may feature them in an upcoming episode. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the Building Code so you never miss a conversation that can help build your business smarter. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.